In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
The Ages begins with the shocking story of Cain and Abel and the journey of violence and revenge spanning thousands of years, following Cain through his cursed life from an ancient invasion of malicious angels to the American Revolutionary War. A masterful, compelling journey through time, The Ages delves deep into arcane knowledge, myth, and legend. The art is stunning, and the story takes you on a journey where mortals, immortals, angels, and demons are all forced to deal with the folly that is God's creation. It's a beautifully dark and gritty ride through history. This 4-part story follows the astrological procession of the ages and how each 2,500-year age parallels major changes in the development of Earth's inhabitants. Cain's blasphemous struggle with the divine and sacred tyrant God will create and crumble empires, shape history, and cause a cosmic cataclysm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Monday, November 4th, 1963. Over the weekend, the coup in Saigon took place. Culminated 3 months of conversation about a coup, conversation which divided the government here and in Saigon. Opposed to a coup was General Taylor. The Attorney General, Secretary McNamara, to a somewhat less degree, John McCone, partly because of an old hostility to Lodge, which causes him to lack confidence in Lodge's judgment, partly as a result of a new hostility, because Lodge shifted his station chief. Semicolon, in favor of the coup was State, led by Abel Harriman, George Ball, Roger Hillsman, supported by Mike Barstow at the White House. I feel that we must bear a good deal of responsibility for it, beginning with our cable of early August, in which we suggested the coup. Period, in my judgment, that wire was badly drafted. It should never have been sent on a Saturday. I should not have given my consent to it without a roundtable conference in which McNamara and Taylor could have presented their views. While we did redress that balance in later wires, that first wire encouraged Lodge along a course to which he was, in any case, inclined. Hawkins continued to oppose the coup on the ground that the military effort was doing well. There was a sharp split between Saigon and the rest of the country. Politically, the situation was deteriorating. Militarily, it had not had its effect. There was a feeling, however, that it would. For this reason, Secretary McNamara and General Taylor supported applying additional pressures to Zim and New in order to move them.
Hello. Very naughty.
Why do the leaves fall? And why does the snow come on the ground?
Because
Why do the leaves turn green? Spring. And where do we go to skate, Sansport?
how big it's
It's summer.
and then you're with me.
I was shocked by the death of Zim and knew. I'd met Zim with Justice Douglas many years ago. He was an extraordinary character while he became increasingly difficult in the last months. Nevertheless, over a 10-year period, he'd held his country together, maintained its independence under very adverse conditions. The way he was killed made it particularly abhorrent. The question now is whether the generals can stay together and build a stable government, or whether Saigon will turn on public opinion in Saigon, the intellectuals, students, etc., will turn on this government as repressive and undemocratic in the not-too-distant future. Period. Also, we have another test in the Autobahn today.
The Abracast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
Before I get into this thing, I need to remind everyone I got a call for music out. So I'm looking for some music to play at the end of the show while I decompress. So if you are in a band, know a band, have, I don't know, a keyboard, want to fart into a microphone, whatever, send me a link to your Bandcamp or whatever at towers113@gmail.com. I got just say, like, I try to do the show, I try to do it once a week, but I fail miserably. Last month, I actually did 8 episodes last month. That's 8+ hours. Hours, everyone. However, I did break my own personal record. I got over 43,000 downloads last month, so thank you guys for that. And thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all of you, really. And thank you for sticking with me, because this might be a tough episode for a lot of people. We are going to be stepping on some sacred cows this episode. And I think with the topics we're going to cover here, that might be saying something. I mean, we just did an episode explaining to Lucasfilm how they don't understand their own story mechanics. So, I mean, I'm willing to step on Lucasfilm. I'm willing to step on Disney. What am I going to do with the likes of JFK, LBJ, Nixon, maybe a little Ford, Vietnam, and Tom Hanks? And let's not forget the New York Post. Ha ha ha. So I have a ton of stuff here. I have a ton, literally, figuratively speaking, I have a metric ton of information here. And as I was trying to collate it and figure it out, I was like, all right, this is going to be like 2 or 3 episodes. However, I'm looking at my desk and I'm like, I got so much shit going on. I got a special project going on. I got my own shit going on. I just can't do this for 2 or 3 nights in a row. So I'm gonna just try to power through and crunch this all into one episode. So we might get 3 episodes out of this. I'm just starting this thing off. I don't know, or you might get like a 3-hour episode. I'm not sure. So this is it. I mean, like, I've been doing this research. I've been reading these fucking Pentagon Papers for so long. I just want to get this thing fucking done. I mean, for fuck's sake, I was happy when this hyperspace thing came up last week, because I had already been doing the research on this, and I was like, I'm going to have to just crush through it and get it done. But it, like, bought me another couple days of doing the research to finish this thing up, and I'm sick of it. And every time I'd fucking turn on the TV, I see a commercial for this fucking movie. It's all driving me bananas. So every once in a while, I feel like I can be pretty antagonistic on the podcast, or like a little bit of a Debbie Downer. Like the one thing that pops up to my brain is the Armenian genocide episode, and I'm in the middle of it, and I'm just bumming myself out so much. But like, I do feel also that sometimes I get like negative at the information, so I feel like that's kind of creeping up too. So I got a bum, my wing's still messed up, my elbow's still jacked. It's getting a lot better, but it's still fucked up. I have so many pages of notes and reading to do, and I'm also getting antagonizing towards the topic already. I'm like 11 minutes. I'm not even through the first half of page of my notes. So just bear with me, guys. I'll make it as painless as I can. But okay, so seriously, as this post movie is picking up steam, I feel like we just need to talk about Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers, partly because most of the people I see talking about the movie seem to think that it's about Watergate. But it is actually about the Pentagon Papers, which details every single fuck up Kennedy and LBJ did in Vietnam. But I'll get to that. I swear I'm going to get to it, and I'm going to try not to be crazy. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is I want you to mix up your Jin Jihad. I want you to grab your history books and your press credentials. Tonight, my friends, we are going to talk about the Pentagon Papers. Those Pentagon Papers, y'all. Those Pentagon Papers. All right, so we're going to be talking about a web of topics. If you want to check out the connecting shows, you want to check out episode 18, which is JFK vaccinations and the AIDS. Episode 30, Dangerous Life and Mysterious Death of William Colby. Maybe episode 35, which is the RFK assassinations. RFK assassination. There was only one. Episode 43, which is Operation Mockingbird. Episode 44, which is CIA culture creation. Episode 65, which is the end of the 60s and the Sunshine Acid Connection. And 66, which is Seth Rich, Donna Brazil, and the Russian collusion. There's actually two episodes in the 50s section as well. Hold on. Episode 55 and episode 56, which is the Clinton crime stories. So if you want the nebulous, how this fits into that, like there's the nebulous episodes that you got to also check out to get up on into into that thing. Girl, you're a fine motherfucker. Why don't you back that ass up? I got to get a better system for organizing how these all connect. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about like a graphic or some kind of code in the show notes. Because by the time, like, think about a year or two from now, how nebulous this is going to fucking be. It's going to be crazy. Anyhow, that's enough. Like I said, I'm just sort of obsessed with adding context to stuff. So I feel like so few podcasts actually add context to stuff. So I do, in my opinion. So speaking of adding context, let's take a look at why we were actually in Vietnam in the first place. So I want you to rewind your clock back to 1950. Let's look at the Korean War. Why did we fight the Korean War? It was in defense of freedom in Asia. The Soviet and Chinese communism advancing south, crossing internationally recognized borders. It was a war we did not seek, and it was a war with no imperial advantage. There was no resources that we needed to protect or wish to gain. Well, I don't think this war actually ever ended. Both sides are still sort of observing a ceasefire and the demilitarized zone for now. There's been a big flap about who's got a bigger nuclear button right now. This is fucking just ridiculous. While we are still, we still have troops in Korea, and we still support South Korea very much, serving to stabilize the surrounding area and stopping communism. So now let's take a look at that shit show that is the Vietnam War. Why did we fight it? In defense of freedom in Asia? Soviet and Chinese communism advancing south, crossing internationally recognized borders. It was a war that we did not seek, and it was a war with no imperial advantage, no resource that we needed to protect or wish to obtain. Does any of this sound familiar to you? So, in a lot of ways, going into Vietnam, however you will wish to pronounce it, going into Vietnam, the only real difference between it and Korea was time. The 60s was a lot different place than the 50s. We were not nearly as cohesive of a country as we were coming out of World War II. So let's just put that in the back burner. I don't know if it's going to come up later, because I might just cut a whole bunch of shit out so I can move on with my day. So, all right, so now we're going to actually get into what the Pentagon Papers were. In 1967, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara created the Vietnam Study Task Force. This is something that he did, and he did not tell Lyndon Baines Johnson about it. He said that he wanted to create like an encyclopedic sort of guide to the political and military actions in Vietnam. So he's chasing them down. He's got people writing down like the history, what happened, when it happened, and it comes in like a bunch of different volumes. So thanks to the Pentagon Papers, I want to say thanks to them. Thanks to this study, from the Vietnam Study Task Force, which are all available online at the National Archives at archives.gov. And I would just want to say to you, my dear listener, you are welcome, because I read a ton of this shit. I read too much of it. My brain's actually a blender full of Vietnam right now. So they did this thing, and in 1971, it leaks. Some guy got it, and if you want to know the whatever's about it, just go watch this fucking movie that's out. But the guy gets it, and he winds up giving it to the New York Post, which is why the name of the movie is called The Post. So Nixon got elected in 1969, so he was the president when this thing decided to leak. And Nixon's original view on this report leaking was like, so fucking what? He says that the report only embarrassed the JFK and the LBJ administration, so he really didn't care. However, Henry Kissinger argued that it set a bad precedent for the media handling and publishing classified/secret information. So the Nixon administration tried to stop the publication. The war was still being fought, and it was actually about to be won. We won it in 1973. Oh, you didn't know that? They didn't teach you that in school? Well, just hang tight, my friends. I'll get to that in a little while. So they went ahead to try to stop it, and they did all the fucked up shit in the movie that I'm sure they're going to show of whatever he did to try to stop it. Shit, I got to take another fucking break already. Stay tuned. We're going to get back into the timeline of the Pentagon Papers after this. So in 1950, the U.S. starts supporting the French with large-scale military equipment in Vietnam. From the report, we are all in for a long night, my friends. Significant misunderstanding has developed concerning U.S. policy towards Indochina in the decade of World War II and its aftermath. A number of historians have held that anti-colonialism governed U.S. policy and actions up until 1950, when containment of communism supervened, commenting that the first four periods are those at least known even to the specialist. Oh, man. Fall developed the thesis that President Roosevelt was determined, quote, to eliminate the French from Indochina at all costs, unquote. Fall is the name of a guy. That's why I got fucked up, so I'm sorry. I had pressured the Allies to establish an international trusteeship to administer Indochina until the nations there were ready to assume full independence. This erudite anti-colonialism, in Fall's view, led to cold refusal of American aid for French resistance fighters and to a policy of promoting Ho Chi Minh and Viet Minh as alternative to restoring French bonds. But the argument goes Roosevelt died and the principle faded. By late 1946, anti-colonialism mutated into neutrality. According to Fall, whether this was due to deliberate policy in Washington or conversely to an absence of policy is not quite clear. The United States, preoccupied in Europe, ceased to be a diplomatic factor in Indochina until the outbreak of the Korean War. In 1950, anti-communism asserted itself in a remarkable volt. The United States threw its economic and military resources behind France and its war against Viet Minh. And other commentators, conversely prominent among them, was historian of the Viet Minh, had described U.S. policy as consistently condoning and assisting the reposition of French colonial power in Indochina, with the commitment disregard for the nationalist aspirations of the Vietnamese. Whenever I read Indochina here, all I can think of is Pulp Fiction, where Marcellus Wallace is like, if the guy hides out in Indochina, I want a nigga to jump out of a bowl of rice and pop a cap in his ass. May 8th, 1950, the Secretary of State announced that, quote, the United States government, convinced that neither national independence or democratic evolution exists in any area dominated by Soviet imperialism, considers the situation to be such as to warrant its according economic aid and military equipment to the Associated States of Indochina and to France in order to assist them in restoring stability and permitting these states to pursue their peaceful democratic development. So in 1954, the U.S. begins to engage in what's called acts of sabotage and terror warfare in defense of South Vietnam against the commie Northern Vietnam. And whenever I read that, all I could think of is Star Trek, Undiscovered Country, where what's her name is that hot Vulcan, and she explains Sabo is from the base word of it's a Japanese sandal because the workers sabotaged. Okay, Hudson, no, Kim Cattrall, the hot Vulcan. 1954, Vietnam was the crucible of contemporary France. This is back to the report, by the way. If you can't tell from my demeanor, I'm switching back to this fucking report. Military defeat by the Viet Minh, unprecedented victory of Asian over European, was but one political reagent. There was also intense frustration and disappointment among French rightists, calling convictions that sneaker-shod Asian peasants could undo a century of costly labor at France's civilian mission and jeopardize the largest investment of French capital in the Far East. The Doncon Delta region represented in a special way all Vietnam meant to France. Tonkin of all Vietnam was where French economic stakes were highest, where the culture of France most completely overglossed indigenous ways, where stood educational focus of Vietnam, the University of Hanoi, with its French faculty, and where Catholicism flourished among the rural folk. Thus, evacuation of Tonkin, per the dictates of the Geneva settlement, stung less from a sense of humiliation over Dien Bien Phu than from a sense of abandonment. An epoch had closed. France had demeaned. Had the Geneva settlement been fulfilled, France might have retained a presence and influence in Vietnam that would have mollified both the right and the left. After all, no significant body of opinion in France held the French should continue to mold Vietnamese politics, or that the French expeditionary force should remain there undiminished. The reality of the DRV and the exegesis of North Africa rendered such a position untenable. The left and the center were quite willing for France to withdraw under the Geneva formula. Even the Indochina clique within the army recognized the priority of Algeria, but France, in the end, at America's assistance, had to accept withdrawal without the cover of the general elections and to accede to a second, further, more final abandonment. After the Geneva Conference, all the governments involved in the accords, with one significant exception, anticipated that France would remain in Vietnam. The Nam. The exception was the state of Vietnam, whose premier, I'm going to fuck this up a bunch of times, Nego Dan Ziem, they pronounce it Ziem, but it's Diem, was determined to uproot French influence as a concomitant to the establishment of a genuinely independent nationalist government. The policy of the United States was initially directed towards partnership with France and a joint sponsorship of Ziem and the newly independent nation he headed, France, then beset with internal political divisions and plagued with Algeria, evidenced doubt, indecision, and occasional reluctance in aiding Vietnam towards the foregoing objectives. The U.S. was not prepared to wait. In late September 1954, the U.S. cut out the French as middlemen in all of its assistance to Vietnam, and began to deal directly with Diem and his government and his armed forces. Oh, we're still in 54. Okay. October 24th, 1954, Eisenhower, who is the president at the time, President Eisenhower, sends a letter to Diem, announced direct economic aid and military assistance from the U.S., demanded no Vietnamese moves as reciprocation for aid. France called its à la carte américaine, said it violated the principle of joint action adopted in September. December 13th, 1954, France will grant full autonomy to the VNA by July 1955. The U.S. will assume training responsibilities. The USMAAG Indochina will direct the training program under General Ely's overall authority. French and U.S. instructors will be phased out as VNA efficiency increases. Washington approved the minute. Paris objected, particularly to the phase out of French trainers. France did not relent and consent until 11 February 55. December 16th, 1954. This is the first time this happens. Collins recommends Diem be replaced. Diem's failure to include Dr. Quat in the cabinet defense minister confirmed Collins' doubt that Diem's capacity to stabilize the government or rally support for his regime. He recommends Biao Dai's return to be considered, but if this were acceptable, recommends that the U.S. withdraw from Vietnam. Okay, so 1955, the U.S. encourages and directly assists South Vietnam President Ngo Diem his rise to power. So there's a ton of back and forth with this guy. Some of our dudes love him, some of them hate him, and they switch sides a lot. So this is from January 1955. Let me see if I can. What the? January 20th, 1955. Collins report to NSC. December's despair over Diem has dissipated. Diem has acted well on a few matters. Collins recommended continued support for Diem because of without it, South Vietnam will surely fall to communism, and the rest of other Southeast Asia will soon to follow. April 7th, 1955. This is them going back and forth. Collins and Ely now agree. Diem must go. Collins says Diem has proved himself incapable of inspiring unity and must be replaced. Dulles demurs and agrees to consider a change if Collins will fly to Washington for consultations. I gotta take a quickie.
Stigmata Studios presents The Scorpion Strikes. In this comic book, a terrorist called the Scorpion is transported to a secret CIA prison. He quickly turns the tables on the guards and administrators and releases the prisoners. A well-armed anarchist called Constituent Zero assembles a team and fights to take the prison back. This story is a dark political action thriller. The Scorpion's actions set the stage perfectly for the Jin Jihad. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, The Jin Jihad, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
All right, so that takes us up to 1960 when President John Fitzgerald Kennedy is elected. In 1963, the U.S. encouraged and directly assisted with the overthrow of the South Vietnamese President Diem. Then, after that, in 1964, I'm only going to briefly go over these two things, and you're like, what's he doing just glossing over this? It's very important. As you could read, like, the video that I played in the cold open, which is Kennedy recording in the Oval Office his, like, thoughts or whatever, dictating something to Eleanor Lincoln about what happened the day before. He basically greenlit ZM and said, okay, go do your coup or whatever. He says in there, he was like, I know this guy. He was awesome. He really held the country together, and I'm kind of sorry that I had to kill him. So I'm glossing over this stuff because I'm going to get into it in depth in like 2 seconds, but I felt like I needed to stop when all this kind of madness stopped. So like I said, in 1963, the U.S. encouraged and directly assisted the overthrow of the South Vietnamese president, Diem, which, yes, you're right. We've been... Since 1955, we've been working to put this guy in power. He wasn't a puppet government, but he really was pliable and did a lot of the shit we suggested for him to do. And then one day we're just like, you know what, bro, we're done. So the next big thing I'm going to take from the Pentagon Papers is in 1964. Following the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the United States, this is where the United States manipulated public opinion in its preparation for open warfare in Vietnam against the communist takeover of Vietnam. So the Gulf of Tonkin was partially or wholly fabricated, whoever. Like, if you listen to a lot of these conspiracy theorist websites or podcasts or whatever, they're like, it's a false flag, it's a false flag. Well... I don't like that word. I believe it makes everything a little bit too easy, but I do believe that it was partially or wholly fabricated. Whether it was pre-planned or not, I don't fucking know. But I do have this to say. This is from a CIA analyst. He worked for CIA from 1963 to 1990. In the 80s, he was a big wig on some board somewhere. His name is Raymond McGovern. He says, not to mention President Lyndon Johnson. Not to mention President Lyndon Johnson, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, and National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy all knew full well the evidence of any armed attack on the evening of August 4th, 1964, the so-called Second Tonkin Gulf incident was highly dubious. During the summer of 1964, President Johnson and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were eager to widen the war in Vietnam. So we're just going to kind of hang out there for a second, and I'm going to back up. We're going to back up to 1963, and we're going to get kind of in-depth into this, and this is going to be the second kind of part of the episode, okay? But I'm going to take a break. We're probably going to have to recycle this, but yeah. So sorry for all the stammering and stummering. I'm just in my brain trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. All right, where we left off, the year is 1967. Secretary of Defense McNamara creates a Vietnam Study Task Force to create an encyclopedic documentation about the political military action in Vietnam from post-World War II to the present. In 1971, someone from the Study Task Force leaked this, or part of it, to Bob Odenkirk from Mr. Show, who gave it to the New York Post, which was actually being ran by CIA assets. If you remember prior episodes, CIA assets, Katharine Graham and Ben Bradley, who were intent on publishing the top secret documents. Now, I need to point out here that, because this is going to come in somehow, this is going to become relevant. I'm not exactly sure how. I don't know. I haven't seen the movie, but I'm just watching these people on their press junkets or whatever, like where they got to go to all these fucking different places to talk about the movie. Somehow Katharine Graham being a female is a part of this movie. It's a part of this story somehow, that she's female and that she's overcoming something by being female. And I'm like, I'm not sure. I think they might be conflating issues somehow, because yet she might be female, but she owned the fucking New York Post. So I was like, I don't know what kind of adversity you have to get over when you're the boss. I'm actually going to play a clip later where they're talking about, well, it brings up equality issue, the equality issues of women in the workplace. She fucking owned the newspaper. She is more equal than everybody else. All right, I'm not going to get all bogged into this stuff. Okay, the Nixon administration didn't see a need politically to do anything about the leak and subsequent printing of the report at first, because all it did was highlight and showcase mistake after mistake, errors after errors, and Kennedy-sized fuck-ups after Kennedy-sized fuck-ups from the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. Henry Kissinger, however, argued that and convinced Nixon to block the publication of the report, citing that the war was still ongoing and the reports were classified top secret. So Nixon foolishly tried to stop the publication of sensitive documents. They wound up getting published. There was a Supreme Court case. And now this is all now a topic of some self-congratulatory movie that's probably going to wind up going to win Oscars and Golden Globes. The director and all the actors are running around talking about how this movie is relevant to today's current administration. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And I'm going to get to why that's funny towards the end of the episode, for sure. That women's issues, publishing top secret documents and First Amendment rights are a problem of today's administration. I'm going to explain why that is retarded. And these actors and Steven Spielberg, I mean, God, they make good movies, I guess, but they're all just fucking potato heads. I gotta think. All right, so when I was a kid, the movie JFK came out when I was in high school. I actually really loved that movie, but back then I believed it all. I believed all of it. This was before I figured out the politics and, frankly, the sanity of Oliver Stone. And as I learned more and more about Kennedy and what he did or did not do, the more I soured on the whole thing. The whole illusion of Camelot. Like, when I grew up, I had a babysitter who would explain to me. Well, she actually explained to me a lot of things. I actually got to drive her car. I was probably like 12 years old or something. But she read Dune. She always tried to explain Dune to me. I'm like, I don't understand it. Now I understand it. So I'm like, I'm glad, thank you, God. Thank God for Jeannie. I don't want to say her last name or whatever, but she was my babysitter growing up. And she was just always talk about Kennedy and how Kennedy was just so great and he was so trusting and he was the best president ever. But now I just look at that and I'm like, I guess, all right, she was in high school, so I mean, what the fuck could she know? So if you ever heard the show before, I'm not a big fan of Kennedy. Frankly, I don't think he did too much right, and he fucked a lot of stuff up. So I'm going to try to get through the rest of this Pentagon Papers episode, but first, well, I should say my first step of getting through the rest of this is I'm going to back up a little bit from where we took the big break there in the middle. And I'm going to tell you the story of what I think is JFK's biggest fuck up. I'm going to tell you the story of John F. Kennedy and his coup and assassination of Ziem. So, Ziem, just get to know Ziem a little bit. He was from a Mandarin family. His family were like ministers, not like religious ministers, but they were like mayors or comptrollers or controllers of villages and stuff. And his family converted to Roman Catholicism. He was originally wanting to become a monk, but he had a way with people, and given his family and stuff, they wound up giving him a village to sort of be mayor over. And then another one, and soon he wound up being like the mayor or whatever. I mean, it's a different culture thing. I'm not sure I understand it or whatever. I don't know what given a village to control means. But he was a fierce opponent of communism, and he seems like a nice enough guy at first. He was controlling the whole province, and he would teach these villagers about agriculture and like agricultural tricks and like how to build your rice paddies and stuff, and how to build and construct fish ponds and shit like that. Well, he was able to network, and he wound up coming to the U.S., and he met Kennedy. We heard in the cold open in that recording from Kennedy that he knew Ziem personally. He actually sounded like he had a pretty high opinion of him before he iced him. Oh, God. Hold on. Sorry, I'm not editing that out. I just don't have time. All right. So he's working his way up, and if you remember the earlier part of the episode, you'll remember that reading the Pentagon Papers report that the French and Americans worked to put him into power, and how later it was America who pledged their support to his regime. So we headed into the 60s, and this strong Catholic Vietnamese leader willing to take advice from the U.S., and was committed to fighting and stopping communism. This was like the best case scenario for us. We had William Colby, William Colby on the ground there in Vietnam, and other CIA guys and advisors, quote, advisors, unquote. When you hear that, generally speaking, what they mean are special forces guys. Special forces, like their main mission is to link up, and they have kind of like a diplomatic function in a way. I don't want to say it's diplomacy, but they're part of their job, part of what makes special forces is to link up with indigenous forces and kind of teach them our tactics. So like back in like Afghanistan in the 80s, special forces guys were over there trying to like round up all these goat herders and teach them how to fight the Soviets and all this kind of stuff. So whenever you hear like advisors or trainers, what you're looking at here is special forces. United States Army special forces guys. They're communicating, they're teaching tactics, they're trading information, they're arming people, sending weapons, logistics, this kind of stuff. So early in the war, you'll hear like I think it's actually coming up in our talk that we're going to have. I think they even say we have so many American personnel on the ground, but they're non-combat. See, that's kind of like a political term, non-combat, because they are combat guys. They're just not your standard combat troop. They're, like I said, teaching, advising, doing logistics, and training. That's why they're called advisors. So this is the best case scenario. You have these guys training, you have the South Vietnamese soldiers. But, okay, so somewhere in the 60s, an ambassador was sent to Vietnam called Henry Cabot Lodge II. And he showed up, and he was like, he's taking a look around, and he's like, decades of U.S. policy be damned. We have got to get rid of and replace Ziem. You can hear this echo throughout, like when I was reading the actual bits from the Pentagon Papers or the Vietnam report from the study task force. Every other day they were like, Ziem's got to go. No, Ziem's cool. No, Ziem's got to go. No, fuck it, he's cool. So this is still going on. We're talking about 1960 now. I believe that's the date we're talking about. So Henry Cabot Lodge II shows up, and he's like, man, I fucking hate this ZM guy. We got to get rid of him. Meanwhile, ZM was crushing it. He was running around. He was using his army to fucking fight pirates and raiders. He was using his army. He was storming corrupt police headquarters and straightening that shit out. This dude was like a superhero politician. He was just having one small problem. Just one tiny problem. He wasn't getting along so good with the Buddhists. So do you remember that first? I think it was the first. Oh fuck! What was it? That's why you just got to stick to my notes. Rage Against the Machine. You know that first Rage Against the Machine album? You know, the do-do, 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 do. No, that wasn't even the first one. That was Empire of Evil, I think. I don't know, whatever. The first one, it was like the Buddhist monk catching himself on fire. Well, this is something these Buddhist monks would do. And to this day, I still say, like, when I play the shoe on the other foot game, and I'm like, well, think of if Donald Trump sent a pallet full of illegal money to Iran as part of an illegal deal to release hostages. The left would be catching themselves on fire. So that's actually where I got this from, is these Buddhist monks would catch themselves on fire. I think there was like between 7 or 8 of them that did this. And because it was like a real attention grabber, it got a lot of press when it happened. So you can see in the Pentagon Papers where they're like, yep, another Buddhist monk caught himself on fire at protest. So that was sticking in a lot of people's craw. This whole, the Buddhist monks don't like him and they're catching themselves on fire to protest ZM. It really was something that the politicians on our side of the pond were really worried about. So Cabot starts making connections with various generals, and he hatches this plot to have a coup against ZM. Oh, I gotta read something. This is from the study task force. This is from the papers. I don't actually. This is probably a little bit late for full disclosure, but when I say it's from the Pentagon Papers, I'm not exactly sure if the Pentagon Papers mean the whole report. I mean, the report is massive. If you go to archive.gov and you go through there, you could see it. It's massive, and you can read it all. And their PDF tech is pretty cool. You can just copy and paste it onto a Word document. It's pretty sweet. Anyhow, so that's to be said. So if I say it's in the Pentagon Papers, and if the Pentagon Papers are just what they published in the newspaper or not, I don't know. I don't know the difference. But this is actually from the report. Lodge agreed with the approach to the generals, but felt it was futile to present ZM with an ultimatum. He would only ignore in one that might tip off the palace to the coup plans. Lodge proceeded to inform only the generals that were told that the U.S. would no longer support a regime that included Nehru, but that keeping ZM was entirely up to them. This was communicated to the generals on August 27th. The president and some of his advisors, however, had begun to have second thoughts about switching horses so suddenly. And with so little information on whether the coup would succeed, and if it did, what kind of government would it bring to power? As it turned out, Washington's anxiety was for naught. The plot was premature, and after several uncertain days, its demise was finally recognized. So you can see this is like, they get a reprieve. Like, they try to get something going, and it fizzled out on them. And you can see that right now, Washington they were freaking out because they're like, I don't know, should we switch our horses? What the fuck? I mean, we've only been working on this guy for 10 fucking years, putting him into power. However, Kennedy greenlights him and attempts to soften it up later, but he really did greenlight the guy. And when the smoke cleared on November 2nd, 1963, at 6:50 a.m., ZM was dead. Ziem's dead, baby. Ziem's dead. Another Pulp Fiction reference. I'm telling you, it's cyclical. It just do 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 do. Whose motorcycle is this? It's not a motorcycle. It's a chopper, baby. Whose chopper is this? It's Ziem's. Who's Ziem? Ziem's dead. Shortly after, Ambassador Lodge and Admiral Felt had called on Ziem. On November 1st, the generals made their move, accumulating a summer and fall of complex intrigue. The coup was led by General Min, the most respected of the senior generals, together with Generals Don, Kim, and Kiem. And Kiem, they convoked a meeting of all but a few senior officers at JGS headquarters at noon on the day of the coup, announced their plans, and got support from their compatriots. The coup itself was executed with skill and swiftness. They had devoted special attention to ensuring that major political loyal forces were isolated and their leaders were neutralized at the onset of the operation. By the late afternoon on November 1st, only the palace guards remained to defend the two brothers. So what I've omitted so far is that Ziem had a brother who was a general. So they'll talk about these two brothers. Ziem, who is like the president, and then Ziem, who is like this general or whatever. So there's two of them, and obviously they're worried about fucking taking care of both of them. Because you don't want to pop the president and then have this military leader who can fragment. You could split the military, split it up, and say, like, hey, I'm like the next fucking guy in line. So at 4:30 p.m., Ziem called Lodge to ask where the U.S. stood. Lodge, because this guy, obviously, he had no idea that we're the ones that masterminded this whole thing, or at least greenlit it. Lodge was noncommittal and confined himself to the concern for Ziem's physical safety. The conversation ended inconclusively. The generals made repeated calls to the palace, offering the brothers safe conduct out of the country if they surrendered. But they held out hope until the very end. Sometime that evening, they secretly slipped out of the palace through an underground escape passage that went to a hideaway in Cholon. Cholon. I don't know. I don't speak Vietnamese. There, they were captured, and the following morning, after their whereabouts was learned, when the palace fell, shortly, the two brothers were murdered in the back of an armored personnel carrier en route to GCS headquarters. So that's there you go. When you hear about U.S. doing regime changes, that's it. Piping hot right from the desk of JFK. So another crazy thing about this was that this happened on November 2nd, 1963. Do you know what else happened in November of 1963? We'll get to that in a second. Vietnam then fell to control of a never-ending string of military generals, creating nationwide confusion, no continuity of government or policy or plan. November 22nd, 1963, 20 short days after Diem was assassinated, JFK is assassinated in Dallas, literally driving half of the people in the United States insane. Still, to this day. That's true. LBJ took over. August 2nd, 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, now known as a lie or distortion of the truth, was made to expand the war in Vietnam, or Vietnam. I'm just going to keep saying that every time I say Vietnam or Vietnam. At the end of 63, there were 16,000 technically no combat troops. These are the Special Forces advisors. At the end of 64, that amount is up to 23,310 advisors and combat troops. So LBJ immediately started piping combat troops in. 1965. Where is it at? Where did I write it? There's 184,314 troops in country in 1965. The first major battle of Vietnam is right around the corner. And that was the Battle of Ai Drang, November 14th, 1965. This is Hal Moore. This is We Were Soldiers Once and Young. Go put that movie in right now. I fucking dare you. It's such a great movie. It's a little cheesy at some points, but it's a pretty great movie. As a matter of fact, just go read the book. The book's great. Or just go listen to the Jocko podcast episodes of... they were just like a couple weeks ago. I'm going to jump ahead to 1969. Well, actually, first, before I do that, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. And then I'll jump ahead. I'll jump ahead when I'm good and ready. But right now, let's talk about We Were Soldiers Once and Young! All right, I'm going to jump ahead to 1969 when Tricky Dick Nixon, its first year in office. We had, in 69, we had 549,000 troops in country. By 72, South Vietnam. Oh, remember at the beginning of the show when I was like, oh, you didn't know that we won the war? Here's the story, folks. By 72, South Vietnam and the U.S. were crushing. We were winning the war by any measuring stick. Even the North Vietnamese agrees. Now, I'm going to say a lot of this stuff comes from a guy named Bruce Hirsch. Oh, boy, I should practice this. Hirschtinson? Bruce Hirschtinson. There's a Prager U video on YouTube. I'll put a link to it somewhere. Bruce Hirschtinson Prager U video. So a lot of this is his point of view on it. I think it's brilliant. 72, South Vietnam and the U.S. were crushing it. They were winning the war by any measuring stick. Even the North Vietnamese agrees. More on that in a moment. Nixon lifts bombing restrictions and orders bombing on industrial and military targets in Hanoi. Do you guys remember that movie? I think it came out in the 90s. It was called Flight of the Navigator. Or no. That's with the robot spaceship. No. Flight of the Intruder. The Flight of the Intruder was very much less hilarious and cute. It actually had William Dafoe as an intruder pilot. And he just got sick of seeing his buddies get shot down, and he was like, "Look, I'm gonna break the chain of command. I'm gonna go bomb Hanoi." So that's what this is all about. Flight of the Intruder. I'm not saying that was not based on a true story, I don't think, but this is what they're talking about. Nixon goes, "Let's go bomb. We're going to bomb Hanoi," and he also said, "We're also going to go bomb Haiphong," which was North Vietnam's major port city. So he gave them a message, and he's like, look, we're going to stop bombing your ass when you come back to the Paris talks. So the Paris hosted these talks, and North Vietnam left. They were like, fuck this, we don't want anything to do with it. They took off. But we wanted them to come the fuck back. We want them to come the fuck back so we can get them to sign peace treaties. So we were like, we're going to go bomb their asses. Fucking bomb them and fucking keep bombing them until they come back to Paris. So what happens? They came back to Paris. And what'd we do? We stopped bombing them. So on January 23rd, Nixon got on the TV and was like, "Look, we gotta win. We won in Vietnam. Everyone's initialed the accords, and everyone's gonna sign them on the 27th." So January 27th, 1973, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, the fucking Viet Cong, and the United States all signed the Paris Peace Accords, effectively ending the war. We won. We established internationally recognized boundaries. No more pushing south for the commies. However, we also knew that the commies were still going to push south. So, in these accords, they're still going to test us. They're still going to move south. So, what we did is inside these agreements, inside this Paris Accord with South Vietnam, we agreed to resupply them We agreed to resupply them military hardware lost, defending themselves from North Vietnamese aggression. So again, we won. Communism was stopped. In its tracks, son. That's the end. Boom. Put a fucking pop dart in it. I don't know what to say. But that's it. All we had to do is wait. As soon as they moved down, the South Vietnamese would check them. We would rearm them with their stuff. Call it a day, bitches. That's it. It's over. It's over. So we won. Until, well, you know what happened. In 1964, Nixon winds up resigning from his office over Watergate. That November election cycle brought a landslide of Democrat congresspeople into office. The Democrats used their new majority to defund the promised military aid. On April the 10th of 1975, President Gerald Ford took to the TV begging Congress to keep the word of the U.S. Democrats just got up and they left while he was speaking. April the 30th, listen to how fast that was. April 10th, he got out there and pleaded. He got out there and was like, come on, let's just keep our promise to these guys. 20 days later, South Vietnamese surrendered. The whole shithouse went up in flames, as they say. We knew the North Koreans would violate the accords. That's why we planned for it. We just had that resupply clause or whatever in there. So we knew that they were going to do it. We knew how we were going to fix it. We just didn't know that the Democrats were going to metamorphosize into pinko commie bastards so fast after JFK got popped. It's crazy, son. It's crazy. So here we're gonna get into this. We're gonna wrap it up soon. We're gonna wrap it up soon, everybody. I promise. All right, so that is that. And this is this. So this is from CBS this morning. I don't know what morning. I guess December 12th or something. This is the best one I could find with... There was another one, but I think they pulled it because he was so crazy. Anyhow, this is a clip from this. It's actually like 9 minutes long, but I'm only playing like a minute and something of it. So this is the genius Tom Hanks, who, you know, he's hard to get a read on because he does these great movies, like this one, like the one about the spaceship, and then like he does the TV show From the Earth to the Moon, and then he like does you know, he was involved in Band of Brothers, and then he did Saving Private Ryan. I got to tell you though, you know, I talk a lot of shit on Matt Damon, but Saving Private Ryan's probably my favorite Matt Damon movie besides Team America: World Police, because I don't have to believe he's special, because he's not talking about hydrochlorofluorobins in the atmosphere. Like, I don't have to believe he's like good at anything, because he's just this stupid dipshit private. He's not super courageous. He's not super smart. He's not super competent at anything. You know, that's where I'm like, I just can't see him. He's just not super smart. He's not, I don't think he conveys competence at all. So he's such a hard thing to get a read on because he got all this great stuff. Fucking Forrest Gump was awesome. It's all about like rugged, you know, American individualism, and you know, we're gonna make it to the moon, we're gonna do all this stuff. But then you listen to him talk here, and he's just a fucking potato head. And then Meryl Streep, he cuts her off. When this gets transferred on, she's in the middle of talking about how it's so hard to make decisions when you have a vagina. I don't even know what this bitch is talking about. But here we go.
She had a lot going against her in that time. Yeah, that's part of our story.
This week in 1971, it took on, you know, three major topics that seemed to never go away. It was Katharine Graham becoming Katharine Graham, and all the issues of equity and equality that go along with that, as far as gender goes. A government trying to keep essentially the truth secret so that they could continue to obfuscate what was really going on the ground in Vietnam, as well as a type of attack on the First Amendment, that the freedom of the press, that we thought we were sort of making a museum piece. We had no idea. We were a bit surprised that all three of those would be.
But I think that's why Stephen wanted to do it this year, especially was because of the siege on the free and independent press.
And let's talk.
All right, so let's talk about that. First of all, Tom Hanks thinks that if he dresses up like a NASA scientist, he comes across as being smart. So let's talk about this. He's saying that. I mean, I'm going to break this down, but there's something that I don't have in my notes that I just need to talk about real quick. He's talking about the government suppressing the publication of this top secret document to cover up what was going on the ground in Vietnam. Well, this study stops in 1967 when it was commissioned. This study isn't about what was going on in Vietnam in 1970 or 1971. He's just an idiot. I'm gonna try to holster some of this because I got a lot of shit to say, and I don't want to turn anyone off. I want you guys to listen to me. I want you to listen to me when I try to get through all this stuff. Trying to stay calm. Another thing is like, again, I just had to point out when she's like, there's the problem with, when he says there was a problem with inequality in the 70s. It's just like today. Well, the problem is with this, they're trying to use Katharine Graham as the focus of this gender inequality, where she was the boss at the fucking newspaper. All right, you have a couple major newspapers in the 70s, right? I mean, you have way less of them now because print is dead, as Egon Spengler would say. But they're like, oh my God, these chicks really had it tough, as far as equality in the workplace is going. I mean, look at Katharine Graham. She was only the boss of the fucking Washington Post or the New York Post. I keep saying Washington Post. God, I hope it's the New York Post because I've really fucked this up if it's not. All right, here we go. These potato-headed actors, they think they're making a movie to mirror the Trump era. They can't even see the absurdity of what they are saying. So let's go. So I can I need to wrap this fucker up. All right. So in reality, it's more like a post Hillary movie or a post Clinton movie. So stick with me, because I'm not sure how Katharine Graham is portrayed as struggling with women's issues. But here, okay, so she's a woman, true, but she owned the fucking Post, and she was the editor of it. But okay, so let's talk about women's issues. So I just Google searched stuff and ran through. So here goes. This is going to get pretty ranty, but like I said, just bear with me. I want you guys to hear what I'm saying and not respond to my tone. So I'm going to try to do this calmly, but I'm in a rush. I mean, I'm fighting time here. Listen to this crawler across this thing. Start the presses. They can't even speak in a fucking sentence. Streep and Hanks on new movie, journalism, and politics. Okay, so Google searched this. So you want to talk about women's issues? Let's talk about this. Obama White House pays women less than men. That's the Washington Examiner, July 6, 2016. Clinton Foundation and Gender Pay Gap Worried Campaign. That's money.cnn.com, October 21st, 2016. Elizabeth Warren pays female staffers less than their male counterparts. Oh, that's Snopes. It says mixture, whether it's true or false. Pocahontas. Hillary Clinton, huge $112,000 generational or gender pay gap at Foundation exposed. That's Washington Times, October 18th, 2016. Elizabeth Warren's female staffers made 71% less than males. That's the Free Beacon, April 4th, 2017. Women's issues. You want to talk about women's issues? Let's talk about Democrat John Conyers. Let's talk about Democrat Al Franken. Let's talk about Democrat fundraiser Harvey Weinstein. Let's talk about Democrat campaign contributor Kevin Spacey. Let's talk about Charlie Rose. Let's talk about Bill Clinton. Let's talk about all that shit. Those seem to be women's issues. Now, let's talk about the proper way to handle top secret documents. I did the same thing. So, exclusive Hillary Clinton exchanged top secret emails with her private server. That's Vice News, July 22nd, 2016. Hillary Clinton astonishing post-state access to top secret documents. That's Washington Times, March 31st. Hey, that's my birthday, 2017. Clinton told FBI she had no training on how to handle classified documents. USA Today, September 2nd, 2016. Clinton directed her maid to print out classified materials. New York Post, November 6, 2016. Hillary Clinton fails the ABCs of handling classified information. Washington Post, September 6, 2016. DNC, Debbie Schultz, or I should say Debbie Wasserman Schultz, John Podesta. All of these people don't understand how to operate computers or handle top secret information. Contemplate this on the tree of woe. Oh, you want to do an attack on the media? Okay, let's look at the media. CNN, Donna Brazil giving debate questions to Hillary before debate. WikiLeaks, clearly journalists sending stories to Hillary camp for approval before they submit them to their editors. The one guy was like, I'm a total shill for you. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Go read the fucking WikiLeaks. Oh, Obama. Oh, remember when Obama was spying on reporters? Sherilyn Atkinson and James Rosen as co-conspirators? You want to talk about fake news? Okay, CNN. Others spread honest-to-goodness fake news. Washington Examiner, November 16th, 2017. CNN armed Trump with ammunition. Washington Post, December 8th, 2017. 18 questions CNN needs to answer after getting busted for fake news. The Federalist, December 7th, 2017. 16 fake news stories reporters have run since Trump won. The Federalist, September 6th. 2017, Clinton campaign, D.C. paid for research that led to the Trump dossier. The Washington Post, October 24th, 2017, Hillary Clinton's campaign wasn't honest about paying for Trump dossier. Newsweek, October 25th, 2017. I mean, what do you want? You guys are like, why is he on Twitter all the time? Because that's the only way he can get his message out, because the media is fucking crazy. They're crazy. And they seem to be working against him. So that's why he uses Twitter all the time. And you know what? To you conservatives that are like, I wish you just quit using Twitter. But 8-10 years ago, you were like, oh, I wish Bush would just push back. This is what pushing back looks like. You got to figure out a way to do it and do it. You can't, in this day and age, a Republican president can't rely on the media to message for him. A Democrat can. Oh, yes. You could run guns. You could send illegal pallets of cash. You could do whatever you want. They're never going to fuck around with that. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting preachy. I feel like I need to reel it in a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I need to take some deep breaths. All right, let's wrap this thing up. I don't know if I'm done. I'm just done. I don't know if I'm done with the episode. I'm just fucking done with the episode. You know what I'm saying? So I want to remind everyone I got a call out for music. It doesn't seem to be working. I haven't gotten any. So, I mean, I just don't know what to do. I don't know. I guess I'll just end the episode. You know? I've been posting some stuff up on the Abercast page. No one's really talking there. No one's really responding or talking, but I am posting more stuff up there, so go please find the Abercast page on Facebook. I'm finding stuff that, like, josh around about whatever topic I did. I posted a bunch of funny stuff about when I was doing the 6-Day War episodes. I found this thing about, like, U.S. Army guys trying to teach Iraqi soldiers how to do jumping jacks, and that shit, dude, is it's like a fucking it's like a 16 Stooges episode. I don't understand it at all, but it's hilarious. Also found some stuff about Arabs and Jews doing dance-offs, which is really funny. So all that stuff's there. I got some good stuff in the queue to post up about this episode. So please go to stigmatastudios.com. If you're not going to pick up some books, just check it out. All my social media links are up top. Please come and find me. Please. I'm just tired of begging.
Vienna, 1683. Today is September 11th, 1683. The mighty army of the Ottoman Empire, led by the savage and radical terror troops of the Dar al-Harb, surround the walled city of Vienna and begin a siege to break the golden apple of Europe and kill, enslave, or convert all of its inhabitants. The valiant citizens stand against the tyrannical army with the steadfast leadership of Count Ernst Rudiger von Stromberg, the help of the ever-living rebel Cyrus the Dead Guy, and the hopes of the faraway King Jan Sobieski III and his army of flying hussars. The Vienna 1683 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us. The Non-Standard Squad, 1944. World War II. 3 weird American soldiers are on a search and rescue mission into the oldest and darkest regions of Europe. A cursed, ever-living warrior, Cyrus the Dead Guy. An experimental warbot, Sergeant Lane McCord. An all-red axe, mysterious rogue with a demon-possessed arm, come face-to-face with an army of magically corrupted machine-obsessed elves, a magic hammer-wielding Norse Ubermensch, and a Nazi wizard who is a member of the ancient Dark Order of the Shining Hexagon. The Non-Standard Squad 1944 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us.
So, you know, another thing I'm not doing is I'm not trying to sell you, like, underpants or fucking granola bars. So while you're there, pick up some books if you want to support the show. That's the best way to support the show, because it helps me justify spending 8 hours a month doodling, or not doodling. I guess it's spending all the time researching and recording rather than doing work. I am piled up with work. I'm jammed up. I don't even know how I'm going to fucking get out of this. I'm fighting like 3 deadlines, son. And here I'm talking to you about some fucking movie with some fucking towhead with Tom Hanks. So thank you for listening to me passionately babble about this. I'm sorry I started out antagonistic. I hope I loosened up a little bit as we went. I didn't mean to turn anyone off, and I'm sorry if I pissed anybody off. Actually, I don't care. I mean, to me, I think that I'm telling the truth. JFK is kind of a jerk, so... But anyhow, I like to passionately babble at stuff, so thank you for letting me do that. Write, draw something, research something, and record something. That's my new tagline. And thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, distinguished guests, my very good friends in the Congress, and fellow Americans. I stand before you tonight after many agonizing hours and very solemn prayers for guidance by the Almighty. In my report on the State of the Union in January, I concentrated on two subjects which were uppermost in the minds of the American people: urgent actions for the recovery of our economy and a comprehensive program to make the United States independent of foreign sources of energy. I thank the Congress for the action that it has taken thus far in my response for economic recommendations. I look forward to early approval of a national energy program to meet our country's long-range and emergency needs in the field of energy. Tonight, it is my purpose to review our relations with the rest of the world in the spirit of candor and consultation, which I have sought to maintain with my former colleagues and with our countrymen from the time that I took office. It is the first priority of my presidency to sustain and strengthen the mutual trust and respect which must exist among Americans and their government if we are to deal successfully with the challenges confronting us both at home and abroad. The leadership of the United States of America since the end of World War II has sustained and advanced the security, well-being, and freedom of millions of human beings besides ourselves. Despite some setbacks, despite some mistakes, the United States has made peace a real prospect for us and for all nations. I know firsthand that the Congress has been a partner in the development and in the support of American foreign policy, which 5 presidents before me have carried forward, with changes, of course, but not of destination. The course which our country chooses in the world today has never been of greater significance for ourselves as a nation and for all mankind. We build from a solid foundation. Our alliances with great industrial democracies in Europe, North America, and Japan remain strong, with a greater degree of consultation and equity than ever before. With the Soviet Union, we have moved across a broad front toward a more stable, if still competitive, relationship. We have begun to control the spiral of strategic nuclear armaments. After 2 decades of mutual estrangement, we have achieved an historic opening with the People's Republic of China. In the best American tradition, we have committed, often with striking success, our influence and good offices to help contain conflicts and settle disputes in many, many regions of the world. The spirit of America is good, and the heart of America is strong. Let us be proud of what we have done and confident of what we can do. And may God ever guide us to do what is right. Thank you.